Women like you don't deserve crowns. That was the last thing Officer Daniel Mercer said before the scissors touched her hair. The intake room was bright. Too bright. Sterile white light bouncing off concrete and steel. A single red recording light blinked from body camera number 47, the kind that sees everything except conscience. Ava Coleman sat handcuffed on a metal stool, wrists aching from the plastic ties. "I told you," she said, calm, steady. "This is my natural hair." Mercer's smirk didn't move. "Sure it is. You people always got tricks. You people?" she asked quietly. He stepped closer until his breath fogged the air between them. "Yeah, loud, entitled, always crying about rights." A younger officer in the corner swallowed hard but said nothing. The only sound was the hum of the fluorescent light and the click of the scissors opening. Ava's voice dropped to a whisper. "You cut that, and you're violating Georgia Code Section 35, subsection 2, unnecessary use of force." Mercer grinned. "You think anyone cares about your little codes?" "Someone will," he chuckled. "Not tonight." He yanked a fistful of her curls and began to cut. The sound was small but violent. A slice through silence, a wound disguised as procedure. Strands fell to the gray floor like black feathers. No one moved. The intake clerk looked away. The officer in the corner turned off his phone. "Smile for the camera," Mercer said. "You'll want to remember this when you tell your little sob story." Ava looked straight into the lens. "I will," she said. Hours later, the report hit the system, resisting search. Non-compliant. Minimal force used. Minimal. That word always hides the worst parts. The footage? Deleted body camera number 47. Malfunction error. But Mercer didn't know there was a second camera. Security camera 12, angled high from the corner. Its hard drive uploading automatically to a cloud server labeled Evidence Review. It caught everything. The smirk, the scissors, the fall of her hair. By sunrise, the story had already flipped. "Combative woman at intake," the local paper wrote. They showed the same still image. Her standing, hands cuffed, cropped just enough to hide the officer holding scissors behind her. Police statement. Subject attempted to conceal contraband in her hair. Officer acted according to policy. Policy. The word Mercer loved so much. But here's what he didn't know. Ava Coleman wrote part of that policy. She didn't scream, didn't post, didn't call a lawyer. She just went home, washed the chemical dust from her scalp, and opened her laptop. Chain of custody request. Preservation of evidence order. Georgia Code citations, all typed in silence. The name at the bottom of each form read, Honorable Ava J. Coleman. Presiding Judge, 14th Judicial Circuit. 2 weeks later, the precinct received an email from the State Judicial Oversight Office. Subject, inquiry, intake misconduct allegations. Attachments, security camera, 12 footage, chain of custody verification, body camera inventory log. The chief stared at the name. "Judge Coleman?" Mercer laughed when he heard. "She's bluffing. That lady was no judge." Then came the subpoena. The footage went public 48 hours later. 43 seconds of humiliation and precision cruelty. The image froze on her eyes. Calm, unbroken. Reporters flooded the courthouse steps. The same courthouse where she would one day preside. "Officer Mercer," one journalist asked, "any comment on the leaked footage?" He said nothing. He didn't need to. The video spoke for him, and against him. Internal Affairs opened their files. 12 prior complaints, 5 settled quietly. No discipline. Pattern. Black women, same officer, same charge, resisting search, average payout, $42,000 each. Total, over $500,000, and every time. The official reason was malfunctioning camera. By the time Mercer sat down for his disciplinary hearing, the quiet had turned into pressure. He looked up, and there she was. Ava Coleman, in her black robe, sitting at the front of the room. He froze. That same voice he mocked now filled the chamber, controlled, resonant. "Officer Mercer," she said, "do you recognize me?" He opened his mouth. No sound came. "Maybe this will help," she said, nodding toward the monitor. The footage from security camera 12 began to play. The sound of scissors. The laughter. His own words. Women like you don't deserve crowns. The room went cold. Afterward, the department tried damage control. They called it a lapse in judgment. They suspended him pending federal review, but there was no statement strong enough to undo what that footage had shown. When reporters asked Ava if she planned to sue, she shook her head. "I don't need to," she said. "I need reform." Within months, new policies were signed into effect. Mandatory camera redundancy for all booking areas. Ban on involuntary hair removal during intake. Annual bias training certified by the Judicial Oversight Committee. 1 year later, she walked back into that same booking room. The same chair. The same mirror. This time, she wasn't the detainee. She was there to inspect compliance. She ran her hand over the short curls she'd kept. "Perfectly fine as they are," she said softly. "I won't grow them back. They remind me who still needs protecting. You've seen abuse. You've seen denial. But this is what happens when dignity learns to speak fluent law. Share this if you believe respect is not granted. It's owed. Because sometimes karma doesn't come in a uniform. Sometimes it walks in wearing a robe." By morning, the department already had its version of the truth polished and ready. Officer Mercer followed intake protocol, the statement read. The detainee became combative, forcing the officer to restrain her. Combative. The word they use when a black woman asks why. The public information officer, a man named Travis Holt, stood at the podium that afternoon, flanked by flags and cameras. "We stand behind our officers," he said, lips barely moving. "There is no evidence of misconduct." A reporter raised her hand. "Is there body camera footage?" Holt smiled, the kind that hides fear. "Unfortunately, the device malfunctioned during upload. But what matters is this: our officers remained professional. Professional. Always professional when the camera blinks out." Inside the precinct, Mercer scrolled through headlines with satisfaction. "Told you," he said to his partner. "They always believe us first." The younger officer didn't respond. He stared at the floor. "You cut her hair, Dan," Mercer shrugged. "Policy." "You went too far." He laughed. "You think Internal Affairs cares? They've covered worse." He was right about one thing. The cover-up machine had already started. An unsigned memo went out to the chain of command that night. Subject: clarify intake procedures, hair search compliance. Directive: officers may perform physical searches when necessary to ensure safety and prevent concealment of evidence. A bureaucratic eraser. One paragraph to make the violence sound reasonable. Meanwhile, across town, a local news producer was reviewing a strange file that had appeared in her inbox. No sender, no subject line, just a link titled Camera 12. When she clicked it, the playback loaded a grainy feed. Booking desk, bright light, an officer holding scissors. A woman motionless, silent, unbroken, no sound. No time code. Just 43 seconds of truth that didn't fit the department's story. The next day, the morning talk shows had their angle. Was the officer justified? Should booking protocols change? Is this another isolated incident or part of a trend? They asked questions without really asking. No one said her name. The police union spokesperson appeared on every network, his tie immaculate, his voice measured. "The public doesn't understand the pressure our officers face. Intake rooms are volatile. One wrong move can be deadly." He paused, practiced sympathy creasing his face. "Let's remember, this could have gone much worse." Worse. That's what they call mercy when the evidence is inconvenient. In the district office, Holt drafted the official press package. A cropped still photo of Ava, head turned away. A redacted intake form. A closing line. No further comment at this time. They thought it would end there. But what Mercer didn't know was that Ava had quietly filed a preservation order the night before. Filed Coleman v. City of Atlanta. Case number 22-0719. Orders: secure and retain all video, audio, and digital logs from July 8th. Signed, the Honorable Judge Ava J. Coleman. Her title was there in plain ink. No one at the precinct had bothered to read it. 2 days later, Internal Affairs received a data request from the State Judicial Oversight Committee. Attached was a short message. We are investigating allegations of evidence tampering related to the detention of a sitting judge. For the first time in his career, Mercer's hands shook. The department scrambled. Emails flew between command staff. From Captain Reynolds to Chief Mathers. Subject, urgent, do not release camera. 12 footage. Note, pending review. Legal risk high, but by then it was too late. The leak had already hit the open web. The footage spread like wildfire. 43 seconds that stripped away the script. Every frame contradicted their carefully built lie. No combative suspect. No hidden contraband. Just a woman enduring a humiliation the camera could barely capture. The city's press office went silent for 3 days. Then, a new statement appeared, softer this time. We regret the distress caused by the incident at Fulton County Booking. We are committed to transparency and accountability. The words were clean. The actions weren't. Behind closed doors, the district attorney's office quietly contacted the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. Not to seek justice, to limit exposure. They needed a scapegoat. And Mercer's name was already trending. He still believed he could talk his way out of it. This is getting blown out of proportion, he said in the locker room, voice trembling. She's making it political. His partner said nothing. He'd already been called to testify. At a late-night meeting, the mayor asked the chief one question. How bad is it? The chief exhaled. It's systemic, sir. We've had 118 complaints in 5 years. 70% involve women of color. If she opens that file, it's not one officer, it's the whole intake division. The mayor leaned back, silent. Then pray she doesn't. But Ava already had. A quiet war began. Policy versus proof. The city tried to scrub data from the archives, to rewrite the intake manual, to close the door before the public caught up. But Ava was methodical. Every motion, every exhibit, every affidavit was already in motion, sealed and time-stamped under federal law. She didn't want vengeance. She wanted structure. Her filings named not just Mercer, but the supervisors who signed off on his behavior. Chain of command, line by line. By the time the press learned her full identity, it was too late for spin. The woman they had called combative was sitting on the state's Judicial Reform Committee, the same body that approved police training standards. When she finally spoke publicly, it wasn't a press conference. It was a court order. The narrative has been false from the start, she said. The footage tells the truth. The law will handle the rest. And it did. Within a week, the Department of Justice issued a formal inquiry. The mayor announced an external audit of booking procedures. Mercer was placed on administrative leave, pending criminal review for civil rights violations and destruction of public record. The cover story had collapsed, but the deeper story, the pattern, the quiet rot under the badge, was only beginning to surface, because Ava wasn't just after one officer. She was after the system that had protected him for years, and she had the receipts. Have you ever seen an entire department try to outrun its own evidence? That's where we're heading next. The department thought they'd buried the truth. They didn't know she'd already memorized the graveyard. Ava Coleman sat alone in her study, morning light crawling over a desk cluttered with manila folders, USB drives, and a single blue legal pad. She wasn't angry. She was assembling order, the kind the law was built to protect. Each file had a tab. Each tab a date, each date a hole in their story. Her right hand hovered over a sealed envelope marked Body Camera Number 47, Copy, for Federal Review. Inside that envelope lay the thing Mercer thought he had destroyed, a full mirror upload from the county's backup archive. The server that nobody bothered to check because no one imagined a judge would know the internal retention schedule by heart, but she did. She pressed play. The screen flickered. Static, gray, then motion. Mercer's voice filled the room. Policy. Take it off. Her own voice calm. That's not a wig. The scissors rising. The sound of laughter. Then silence. For 12 seconds, the footage froze. No movement, no sound. before cutting abruptly to black. On the metadata screen, a timestamp marker blinked. Manual stop triggered. That meant someone had physically pressed the button. That someone was Mercer. She opened another file. Chain of custody report. July 8th intake. Every device, every officer, every upload had a log. Most looked routine, until she found an edit entry, user ID, Rains.d action, deleted clip device, body camera. 47. Reason code, corrupted file. But Rains wasn't assigned to the booking desk that night. His shift log placed him 2 miles away at the downtown courthouse. In law, that's what they call an inconsistency of interest. In Ava's mind, it was the first crack in the dam. The next morning, she filed a Freedom of Information request for the precinct's Digital Evidence Management System logs, citing Georgia Public Records Act, Section 54, subsection B. 3 days later, the city clerk sent a redacted response, black boxes covering most of the document. But the clerk made one mistake. The footer remained visible. Audit review scheduled for July 29th, DOJ Civil Rights Division. That told her everything she needed to know. The Department of Justice was already watching. She didn't go to the press. She didn't post a statement. She let the bureaucracy tighten its own noose. Every 48 hours, she sent a follow-up to City Legal Affairs. Subject: missing upload verification logs. Attachment: Federal Retention Statute, Pri-Rao 2071B. She knew how long they had before federal intervention, 7 days after a public record request. Any alteration was a felony. She waited 6. By the 7th day, the city's IT division produced a corrected version of the footage. This one ended sooner. No scissors, no laughter. Just Mercer reading her rights. They didn't realize Ava already had the original. So when the Justice Department subpoena arrived, she quietly sent both versions, side by side. One truth, one lie. In Washington, a young DOJ analyst named James Lynn noticed the discrepancy first. Checksum mismatch, altered hash code. That phrase would appear in the report that followed. Under the heading Potential Evidence Tampering, Fulton County Sheriff's Department. Within 24 hours, the inquiry was formal. At the next internal review, Ava sat in the back of the room, silent, unannounced. Mercer was there, fidgeting in his chair, sweat darkening the collar of his uniform. The board chair cleared his throat. "We've been informed the Department of Justice has joined our review." Every whisper stopped. "And we've received new evidence," the chair continued. 2 versions of the same body camera file." He hit play. The first clip, their edited one, played in silence. Then he loaded the original. The scissors glinted. The laughter echoed. Mercer looked around the room, face draining. "Where did this come from?" the chair asked. Ava stood. "From the Federal Mirror backup," she said softly. "Policy requires automatic duplication within 24 hours. You'd know that if you read your own retention schedule." The room froze. Her voice was measured, unshaken. She wasn't performing. She was correcting the record. By that afternoon, Internal Affairs had turned over all booking footage to federal custody. Investigators found patterns, identical malfunction notes across multiple dates. Same phrasing. Same officer signatures. From 2018 to 2023, 118 complaints alleging intake misconduct. 71% involved black women. 38 listed hair removal without consent. 6 included Officer Mercer's name. Average settlement, $42,000. Total payout, $4.3 million, and yet no disciplinary action. Not one. One folder caught Ava's attention. Complaint, 2021-04B, same booking desk. Same scissors, different woman. Dismissed for lack of evidence. Ava picked up the phone. "This is Judge Coleman," she said. "I'm reopening complaint 2021-04B under judicial review." "On what grounds?" the clerk asked. "New evidence," she said. "Pattern and practice." That phrase, pattern and practice, is the language of systemic change. As the investigation deepened, the city's legal department began to fracture. Whispers leaked to the press. Missing files, falsified reports, supervisors under scrutiny. Each denial crumbled against the timeline Ava had built. She wasn't dismantling them with outrage. She was doing it with precision. Every file she'd collected told a story of casual cruelty buried in paperwork. Every policy they cited was the weapon she turned back on them. One evening, as she reviewed affidavits by lamplight, her clerk asked quietly, "Why not just sue, Judge?" "You'd win," Ava smiled faintly. "Winning isn't the point. Changing it is. When the DOJ's final interim report landed, it was devastating. Findings: routine violation of intake protocol, suppression of evidence in at least 12 incidents, supervisory negligence extending to command level. The report concluded, these practices constitute a pattern of discriminatory abuse inconsistent with the Constitution and federal civil rights law. In short, they didn't just cut her hair. They cut corners, and now the law had caught up. That night, she walked past the courthouse steps where she had once been booked like a criminal. The marble still gleamed under the streetlights. She paused, looking up at the words carved into the facade, "Equal justice under law." Her reflection stared back in the glass doors. Short hair, sharp eyes, unbroken spine. The cover story was gone. The investigation was complete. All that was left was accountability, and that was coming next. Atlanta woke to headlines that morning that didn't sound real. Booking officer under federal review after leaked footage. Haircutting incident sparks civil rights probe. Who is the woman in the video? By 9 a.m., every camera in the city was pointed at the Fulton County Courthouse. Reporters crowded the marble steps, microphones angled like weapons toward the doors. Inside, officers shifted nervously in their seats. The disciplinary board had been expanded, 3 state officials, 1 federal observer, and a single empty chair waiting at the front. "Who's presiding today?" a young reporter whispered. "Judge Ava J. Coleman," someone said. The name hung in the air like static. Mercer sat at the defense table, stiff in his uniform, eyes fixed on the polished floor. His attorney leaned in. "Just keep your answers short," he whispered. "Don't lose your temper. She's just a judge. She can't do anything criminal here." Mercer nodded, jaw tight. He didn't yet realize the cameras outside were live streaming to half the country. The bailiff entered first, then the clerk, then the silence. All rise. The doors opened. Ava Coleman stepped into the room. The crowd didn't gasp at first. They breathed in at once. A wave of recognition that rolled from the back rows to the front bench. She wore her black robe open over a charcoal suit, her short natural hair uncovered, deliberate. The light caught the silver pin on her collar, the insignia of the Judicial Oversight Committee. She walked to the bench, eyes level, movements unhurried. "No anger, just gravity." Mercer's hand twitched against the table. "That's her," someone whispered from the gallery. "That's the woman A gavel cracked once." "You may be seated," Ava said. For a long moment, she said nothing. Papers shuffled. A chair creaked. Then she spoke. "Officer Daniel Mercer, you are here under review for violation of intake procedure, destruction of digital evidence, and conduct unbecoming of an officer of the court. Do you understand these charges?" His voice was faint. "Yes, Your Honor." Her gaze didn't move. "You have the right to respond." He swallowed. "I was following protocol." She was resisting. I thought she might be hiding something." The federal observer raised an eyebrow. "Hiding something where, officer?" Mercer hesitated. "In her hair." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Ava's expression didn't change. "In her hair," she repeated softly, as if tasting the absurdity aloud. "Yes, ma'am." "You thought it necessary to cut it?" He nodded once, eyes fixed on the table. "Policy allows for searches." "Searches," she said. "Not humiliation," she gestured to the clerk. "Please play the footage." The screen came alive, a grainy feed from security camera 12. The room dimmed. There it was again, the intake counter, the scissors flashing under cold light, the sound of laughter. And her, still quiet, composed, as hair fell to the floor like ash, someone in the back whispered, "My God!" When the screen went black, Ava spoke again. "Do you recognize the person in this video, Officer Mercer?" He hesitated. Yes, and who is she? His throat worked. You! Correct, she said. Her tone stayed even. That was me. Gasps broke loose. Cameras clicked. The reporters who'd waited all morning suddenly had their headline. Mercer's attorney rose. Objection, Your Honor. This presents a conflict. There's no objection, Ava said, her voice cutting through. This is not a trial. It's an inquiry. You wanted your story told under oath. Now you'll tell it. He sank back into his chair. Officer Mercer, she continued, you told the public I was combative, that I resisted, that you feared for your safety. Would you like to amend your statement? He looked at his lawyer, then down. I was wrong. How wrong? Completely, the DOJ observer leaned forward. Your Honor, may I enter supplemental evidence? Ava nodded. A binder slid across the table, thick with complaints. The observer spoke clearly for the record. 118 documented intake complaints over 5 years, 71% involving black women, 38 cases of forced hair removal, 6 naming Officer Mercer directly. The room fell silent. Ava looked at Mercer. Did you know that pattern existed? No, Your Honor. You were part of it. He started to speak, but she held up a hand. You don't need to defend it. The evidence does not need your permission. The gallery stirred, a whisper of awe mixed with shame. Everyone had seen these hearings before, but never like this. This wasn't rage. This was justice with posture, Ava stood. This board will recess for deliberation. Officer Mercer, you will remain under federal oversight until the Department of Justice concludes its review. You are hereby suspended without pay, pending criminal referral. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing left to say. She turned to the gallery. For the record, I will not seek damages. I will seek reform. Reporters scribbled faster. When the session ended, Mercer sat alone, head in his hands. His attorney touched his shoulder. You didn't just cut her hair, he said quietly. You cut the wrong woman. Outside, the courthouse steps overflowed. News vans, protesters, signs that read, Her crown, her right and justice wears a robe. Ava walked down the steps slowly, every camera trained on her. Microphones pushed forward. Judge Coleman, any statement? She stopped, looked directly into the lenses. What happened to me happens quietly to too many, she said. But quiet doesn't mean invisible. Not anymore. A pause. Wind caught the edge of her robe. Dignity, she said softly, isn't negotiable. It's constitutional. Then she walked past the microphones, through the crowd, straight into the sunlight. Inside, reporters replayed her words over and over, the clip spreading faster than any press release ever could. The department issued a public apology. The mayor called for a review of booking policies. Civil rights groups launched mentorship programs for detained women, but it wasn't pity driving it. It was precedent, because for the first time, the city had to reckon with what happens when the victim is the law. In the weeks that followed, Ava refused interviews. She returned quietly to her docket, hearing cases, signing reforms. The booking policy was rewritten under her supervision. Mandatory presence of 2 female officers for all personal searches. Automatic multi-angle recording of all intake procedures. Prohibition on forced hair removal without judicial authorization. She didn't call it justice. She called it maintenance. Late one evening, she stood again before her mirror, the same mirror she'd faced the night of the assault. Her reflection was different now. Not repaired, not replaced. Refined. The short curls framed her face like armor. Her assistant entered quietly. Judge, the federal report just came through. She took it, skimmed the lines, and nodded. Findings confirmed, she read aloud. Pattern of misconduct. Violation of civil rights. Federal oversight mandated for 3 years. Then she set the paper down and smiled faintly. Good. That'll give them time to learn. That night, she drove past the intake facility. The same building, same faded lettering, same fluorescent glow. Through the window, she saw a new intake officer helping a woman fix her headscarf before taking her photo. The smallest act of restoration. Ava exhaled. For the first time in months, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like repair. In the morning, Her statement would headline every network. Respect is not a privilege. It's the baseline. But she wouldn't see it. She'd already moved on to her next case, because karma, when it's real, doesn't need to announce itself. It just walks into the room calm, prepared, and wearing a robe. The city thought Ava's case was over. They didn't realize it had only opened the door. 3 weeks after Mercer's suspension, a thin envelope arrived at the mayor's office. From Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. Subject: Preliminary Findings, Pattern and Practice Inquiry. It was 10 pages long. 10 pages that burned decades of silence. The first paragraph set the tone. Our review has identified recurring constitutional violations in the Fulton County Booking and Intake Division, disproportionately affecting black women. The next line named it plainly, a culture of discretionary humiliation. Inside the courthouse, the discovery process began. Ava's chambers received a subpoena for all related documentation, complaints, audits, internal reviews. When the records arrived, they filled 8 bankers' boxes, each one stamped with a year. She opened the first, 2018. Complaint after complaint, same pattern. Language repeated, subject refused to comply. Hair obstructed search process, minimal force applied, different names, same sentence structure, same officer signatures. By 2023, it had become a template for violation. Her law clerk, Jordan, set up a spreadsheet. Column A, complaint ID. Column B, officer. Column C, type of force. Column D, victim demographics. Column E, settlement amount. Within hours, a pattern emerged that statistics couldn't hide. 118 verified complaints, 71% black women, 24% Latina women, no disciplinary terminations. Total settlements, $4,312,000. Every dollar was a quiet admission of guilt, paid, sealed, forgotten. Ava leaned back in her chair. They turned payouts into policy, she said softly. Jordan looked up. You think they'll fight it? They'll deny it first, Ava said. Then they'll pay again. It's cheaper than change. She wasn't alone anymore. After the footage went public, women from across the state began sending affidavits, handwritten, typed, some trembling on the page. One letter read, They said I couldn't go before a judge with braids. They made me take them out. I lost my job because of the delay. Another, I told them my hair was sacred. They laughed. Each one added to the record, not just of one incident, but of a quiet policy of control disguised as procedure. The DOJ's investigative team built their timeline. Over 6 years, 5 supervisors had approved identical intake forms, each citing hair inspection compliance. One supervisor, Lieutenant Mathers, had even sent an email in 2020, ensure all detainees undergo grooming inspection prior to booking photos. Avoid leaving hair that obscures identity. Ava underlined one phrase. Obscures identity. Identity, she whispered. They tried to erase it and called it security. At the next oversight hearing, the data went on the record. The federal prosecutor read each figure slowly, deliberately. From 2018 to 2023, 118 substantiated complaints. He paused. Only 3 resulted in written warnings. None in termination. Reporters scribbled furiously. He continued. Of those cases, 22 involved unlawful search or grooming. In all 22, the victims were women of color. He closed the file. That's not coincidence. That's culture. The city attorney tried to contain the damage. Our policies were misinterpreted, she said. There was no intent to discriminate. Ava leaned forward. Intent isn't the measure, she said quietly. Impact is. The silence after that sentence was heavier than any gavel. When the hearing adjourned, the DOJ issued its first mandate, immediate federal monitoring of intake operations for a minimum of 3 years. Each officer would be retrained. Each complaint would be independently reviewed. The memo listed 3 reforms, all signed into law by the City Council within 2 weeks. Dual camera coverage in all booking areas. Zero tolerance for body-based search without consent. Mandatory reporting of racial disparity data every quarter. They called it the Coleman Protocol. The department resisted quietly. Mercer's former supervisor, Captain Reynolds, testified in his own defense. "This is overreach," he said. "One mistake doesn't make a crisis." Ava handed him a folder. "Then explain these," she said. Inside were 6 photos. 6 women, 6 booking reports, same language, same officers. Reynolds' face went pale. "That's not one mistake," Ava said. "That's policy by repetition." Meanwhile, the press dug deeper. A national magazine ran a cover story titled "Her Crown, Their Control." It traced the practice back decades, a remnant of appearance conformity rules written into old Southern police manuals, never repealed, only renamed. Under those rules, non-standard hair presentation had been grounds for additional searches. No one questioned it until a judge became the target. In one interview, a retired intake officer admitted, "We used to joke about it, said we were keeping order. Didn't realize we were breaking something sacred." The clip went viral. Ava never commented. She didn't have to. The truth had found its own voice. But for every reform came resistance. Police unions filed injunctions, calling the oversight morale damaging. They claimed the cameras created unnecessary scrutiny. Ava countered with data. Since the reforms, complaints had dropped 43%. Intake time reduced by 11%. Officer injuries, 0. She presented those figures in a single line to the oversight board. Transparency doesn't slow you down. It just stops you from tripping over your own shadow. At home, her phone rang constantly. Activists, journalists, mothers. Some thanked her. Some cried. She kept a folder labeled Letters of Record. Each one would eventually form the appendix to the DOJ's final report. The last letter came from a former officer who had resigned in 2019. It read, "We were told to cut anything that didn't fit in the frame. I see now what that meant." When the final data review concluded, the numbers were irrefutable. 5 years, 118 complaints, $4.3 million, 0 accountability. Until now. At the press conference announcing the federal findings, Ava stood beside the Attorney General. Cameras flashed. The AG spoke first. "This isn't just about one department. It's about how institutions define dignity. Judge Coleman's courage forced us to look at what we'd stopped seeing." He turned to her. "Judge, any final word?" She stepped to the podium. "Numbers tell a story," she said, "but people live the consequences. I'm not here because of what was taken from me. I'm here because the law gave me a way to take it back, not through vengeance, but through verification." She looked directly into the cameras. "We can't undo what was cut, but we can stop pretending it was ever about safety." That clip would air on every major network within the hour. Commentators called it measured fury. Community leaders called it the moment accountability grew a name. But she called it what it was: proof. Weeks later, as the federal monitors began their audit, the first quarterly report came in: 0 recorded hair-based searches, 0 missing footage, and for the first time, a satisfaction rate above 90% in detainee intake surveys. Small numbers, but monumental. Ava framed that report, hung it on her wall, not as a trophy, but as a reminder the system could learn, slowly, painfully, but it could learn. Outside the courthouse, the mural appeared overnight. A woman with short curls, eyes forward, chin raised. Beneath her, dignity is policy, no signature, no sponsor, just truth, painted in daylight. By then, Ava had already turned to her next reform bill, a statewide initiative to mandate recording preservation for all law enforcement agencies. The draft title read, Justice Through Documentation Act. Jordan asked if she wanted to include her name in the bill's nickname. Ava shook her head. "No, let them forget who wrote it. Just not why." She closed her laptop, turned off the light, and stood by her window. Down below, the city buzzed. Sirens, laughter, the endless rhythm of life. Somewhere, another officer was checking a camera. Another clerk was archiving footage instead of erasing it. That was enough. The evidence was no longer hidden in boxes. It lived in reform, policy, precedent. It lived in a system forced to look at itself and whisper, "Never again." The courtroom was silent, but the air felt electric. Federal seal above the bench. Cameras forbidden. Reporters sketching instead of filming, pencils trembling on the page. At the defense table sat Officer Daniel Mercer, uniform pressed, eyes hollow. Beside him, his attorney flipped nervously through a folder that couldn't protect him anymore. Across the aisle, the Department of Justice team organized their evidence, 10 thick binders stacked neatly. On top, case number 24-11-87, United States v. Mercer et al. And presiding, quietly unshaken, was Judge Ava J. Coleman. "Court is now in session," the bailiff announced. "All rise." The sound of chairs scraping wood filled the room, a collective surrender. When everyone sat, Ava spoke with the calm weight of inevitability. "This is a federal proceeding under Section 242, Title 18, Deprivation of Rights under Color of Law. The defendants are charged with conspiracy to obstruct justice, falsification of public record, and unlawful use of force." Her eyes didn't leave the papers, but every word felt aimed straight at Mercer. "Officer Mercer, Captain Reynolds, and Lieutenant Mathers, you stand accused of violating your oath. Do you understand the charges?" Mercer swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Honor." The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Singh, stood. Her tone was cool, deliberate. "For 5 years, the defendants operated a pattern of abuse disguised as procedure. They humiliated women under the pretext of safety. They destroyed footage, falsified reports, and protected each other through silence." She clicked the remote. A screen lowered behind her, displaying the DOJ logo, then a still image. Ava, seated on the booking stool, her hair half cut, her expression calm, gasps echoed softly through the gallery. "This," Singh said, "is what happens when power forgets who it serves." Mercer looked down, gripping the edge of the table. His lawyer leaned in. "Don't react," he whispered, but Mercer's jaw trembled. "It wasn't supposed to go that far," Singh heard him. "You're right, Officer Mercer." "It wasn't," she clicked again. A timeline filled the screen. 2018, 2023, 118 complaints, 71% black women, 0 terminations. Every dot on the graph was a person. She turned to the bench. "Your Honor, we will prove that this was not a series of isolated incidents. It was a systemic practice enabled by leadership, tolerated by command." Ava nodded once. "Proceed." The first witness was a retired intake officer, gray-haired, weary. He took the stand and adjusted the microphone. "We were told to make them comply. Didn't matter how." "Who told you that?" Singh asked. "Captain Reynolds. Said it was about presentation. Keep them neat for the booking photo. And if they refused?" He paused. "We made them comply." What did that mean? He looked down. Scissors, clippers, whatever was closest. The courtroom stayed silent. You could hear the scratching of the court reporter's keys, each word etched into the permanent record. Next came the digital, forensics expert. He projected 2 versions of the same video. File, the doctored one, and the original recovered. From the Federal Mirror. "Notice the metadata," he said, zooming in. "This file was manually stopped at 02:58:17. The second was deleted 3 minutes later by user Rains D." The prosecutor asked, "And what's the significance of that?" "It means someone intentionally interrupted recording to hide the act. Then they falsified the upload log to claim corruption." He faced the jury. "That's not malfunction. That's manipulation." Mercer's attorney rose for cross-examination. "My client was following orders." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "Whose orders?" The attorney hesitated. "Captain Reynolds." Singh turned to the captain. "You heard your counsel. Would you like to confirm that you ordered officers to cut detainees' hair?" Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. "I instructed them to ensure compliance with hygiene standards." Singh took a step forward. "Hygiene? Or humiliation?" "No answer." "Your Honor," she said. "Let the silence be noted." Ava nodded. "So recorded." Halfway through the proceedings, the gallery began to fill with new faces. Women from old complaints, mothers, teachers, nurses. Some clutched photos. Others held nothing at all. They weren't loud. They didn't chant. They simply watched, Ava noticed. She didn't address them, but her eyes softened, just for a moment. When Mercer finally took the stand, his hands shook so hard the clerk had to help him with the oath. "Do you swear to tell the truth?" "I do." "State your name." "Daniel Mercer." "Occupation?" He hesitated. "Suspended law enforcement officer." "Former," Ava corrected quietly. He nodded. "Former," the prosecutor approached. "Officer Mercer, why did you cut Judge Coleman's hair?" He blinked rapidly. "I didn't know she was a judge." "That's not what I asked." He stared at the floor. "I thought it was policy. We'd done it before." "No one ever said anything." "Because they couldn't," Singh said. "Because you held the scissors." He exhaled shakily. "It wasn't personal." "It always is," she replied. Ava leaned forward slightly. "Officer Mercer, when you cut my hair, do you remember what you said?" His eyes flickered with shame. "I said, women like you don't deserve crowns." The room froze. Ava's tone didn't change. "You were wrong." He looked up. "I know," she held his gaze. "Good. Now you'll learn what accountability looks like." By the time closing arguments began, the courtroom had transformed into something almost sacred. Not theater, but reckoning. Singh's voice carried through every corner. "This case is not about one officer's cruelty. It's about the convenience of forgetting. Every deleted file, every falsified report, every silence, that's how injustice hides. But it only takes one person to remember." She turned toward Ava, then to the gallery. "One person did." Mercer's lawyer made a last attempt at sympathy. "My client has expressed remorse. He cooperated fully once confronted." Singh answered softly. "Remorse after exposure isn't repentance. It's survival." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, their faces were pale, tired, unanimous. "On all counts," the foreperson said, "we find the defendants guilty." Mercer exhaled sharply, head bowed. Reynolds closed his eyes. Mathers whispered something under his breath. Prayer or regret, no one could tell. Ava set the verdict sheet down. "This court recognizes the verdict," she said. "Sentencing will follow federal guidelines under Section 242. Officer Mercer, you will serve 5 years in federal custody. Captain Reynolds, 7. Lieutenant Mathers, 4. All with eligibility for parole after completion of bias rehabilitation and public accountability service." No cheers. No applause. Just quiet acknowledgement. Justice, at last, didn't need noise. Outside, the courthouse steps were filled again. Reporters waited for a statement. Ava stepped out, flanked by federal officials. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. "To the women who came forward," she said, voice steady, "this verdict belongs to you. The law cannot heal what it hasn't seen. Today it looked." She paused. "Accountability isn't vengeance. It's maintenance, keeping the system honest enough to serve everyone." Then she walked down the steps, the same steps where her briefcase once fell, where her dignity was once cut away. This time the crowd didn't look at her with pity. They looked at her with recognition. That evening, national news led with her words. Editorials called it the Coleman verdict. Civil rights groups called it a turning point. The Justice Department announced the creation of a nationwide oversight task force, modeled after the Coleman Protocol. For once, reform didn't come from tragedy alone. It came from persistence. Mercer would later write a letter from prison. It arrived on Ava's desk 6 months after sentencing. It read, "I used to think justice was punishment. Now I know it's clarity. You gave me that, even when I didn't deserve it." She read it once, folded it, and placed it in a file marked Resolved. Then she got back to work. A month later, a federal training academy hung a new poster in its ethics wing. It showed a booking room empty, lights off. At the bottom, in bold letters, "Integrity doesn't record itself. Keep the camera on." Back in Atlanta, Ava sat on her porch as dusk settled over the city. Her daughter braided her hair. Short, soft, resilient. "Mom," the little girl asked, "why didn't you let it grow back?" Ava smiled. "Because I already did. The camera would fade out there. Quiet, human, complete. No score, just her voice in the distance. Dignity should never need permission. Share that truth. Not for me, but for whoever's next." The courthouse emptied slowly like a held breath finally released. Reporters packed their bags. The last flashbulb faded. The marble floors echoed with the sound of shoes and sighs, people leaving, but not forgetting. Ava sat alone in her chambers, robe folded over the chair, sleeves rolled. The verdict still hummed in the air, a frequency only she could hear. Her assistant Jordan stepped inside. "It's done," he said softly. She nodded. "No, it's begun." On her desk lay the letter Mercer had written, still folded. She hadn't answered it, but she hadn't thrown it away either. There are some apologies that belong in the archive, not the heart. Outside, the crowd had turned from protest to quiet vigil. Candles flickered against the courthouse steps. A young woman, one of the former detainees, held up a small hand mirror. The words etched on its back read, "My crown, my right." When Ava stepped out, the murmuring stopped. Someone whispered, "That's her." Not with awe. With gratitude. She didn't wave. She didn't raise her hands. She just nodded, a silent contract between those who had endured and those who would never have to again. A journalist asked the final question of the night. "Judge Coleman, do you forgive them?" Ava looked past the cameras to the horizon, where the city lights met the dusk. "I don't have to," she said. "The law already did its part. The rest belongs to conscience." That night, she returned home for the first time without security following. The house was quiet, her daughter asleep, a single lamp left on in the hallway. Ava walked to the mirror, ran her hand through her short hair. The reflection stared back not as a survivor, but as something steadier, a keeper of order. She exhaled, not with relief but with readiness. The next day, she was due in her office again, docket full, reforms pending. Justice didn't pause for victory laps. 6 months later, Atlanta looked different, not louder, just better lit. Every precinct now had dual cameras in booking areas, one controlled by the department, one by the Independent Oversight Board. Every officer underwent annual bias certification, each signature logged in a federal database. The Coleman Protocol had gone statewide. Within the first quarter, complaint rates dropped by nearly half. During an inspection, a new recruit hesitated before searching a woman's hair. His supervisor shook his head. "Don't touch it. Dignity's policy now. Small sentence. Monumental shift." Back in her chambers, Ava reviewed quarterly reports. Complaint rate, 0.8%. Federal oversight compliance, 98%. The numbers didn't thrill her. They steadied her. Jordan entered with coffee. "You made history, Judge," she smiled faintly. "I made paperwork. History's what people do with it." In the spring, the Department of Justice invited her to Washington to speak at the National Accountability Symposium. She declined the first invitation, then the second. When they asked why, she replied, "Because the work isn't national. It's local. It's personal." Instead, she started a mentorship program for young black women in law, the Dignity Fellowship. The first meeting took place in a classroom no bigger than a jury room. She opened with one sentence. "Don't fight to belong in the system. Shape it so it belongs to you." Months later, an old familiar name appeared on her docket. State v. Raines, David, the officer who'd deleted the footage. He entered quietly. No press, no crowd. His attorney offered a plea. Ava listened, eyes calm. When it was his turn to speak, Raines stood. "I didn't cut anyone's hair, Judge, but I cut corners. I told myself it didn't matter." She nodded. "It always matters. Every button pressed, every file deleted, every silence signed." He swallowed. "I'm sorry," Ava leaned forward. "Then don't say it here. Say it in the report you'll file for the next oversight audit. Make your name mean transparency, not absence." He blinked. "You trust me to do that?" "I trust the system to remember your name," she said. "You decide how." He nodded, and the gavel came down, softly, like punctuation, not punishment. The city awarded her a medal later that year. She accepted it, but only on one condition, that it be named for the women who filed complaints long before she did. So the plaque read, "In honor of those who spoke first, even when no one listened." By winter, her daughter had started high school. One morning, she came downstairs wearing a t-shirt that read, "Respect is baseline." Ava laughed. "Where'd you get that?" Her daughter shrugged. "They sell it outside the courthouse now. Do you like it?" "Yeah," the girl said. "It's true." Later that night, Ava visited the new intake facility. Clean walls, open design, better lighting. Cameras visible. Reminders, not threats. A young officer noticed her and straightened up. "Judge Coleman, ma'am, welcome." She nodded. "You know why I'm here?" "Yes, ma'am." "Quarterly audit," she smiled. "And dignity?" He hesitated, then smiled back. "Non-negotiable, ma'am." Before leaving, she paused at the intake desk, the same spot where everything had started. The air smelled of disinfectant and possibility. She looked down at the floor, spotless now. No stray curls, no shadows of what had been taken. Then she turned and walked out into the rain. Later, standing beneath her umbrella, she saw a mural across the street. It showed a woman with close-cropped hair and the words, "Keep the camera on." Below it, someone had scrawled in marker, "Justice learns." Ava smiled. For the first time, the city didn't feel haunted. It felt alive. The next morning, her calendar read, "Community Review Board, Training Session." She clicked open the agenda. At the top, a new guiding principle she'd written herself. Dignity isn't granted by the system. It's the system's purpose. She closed her laptop, picked up her robe, and headed out the door. You'd think this was the end, but it isn't. Justice, the real kind, doesn't end. It just changes hands. So if you're watching this now, remember, reform isn't a headline. It's maintenance, and dignity, always, is non-negotiable. Share this story if you believe respect should never need permission. The city healed quietly, not with parades or headlines, with changed habits. At Fulton County Booking, a sign now hangs above the entrance. Integrity begins here. The first thing you notice isn't the fluorescent light anymore. It's the warmth. The air doesn't hum with tension. It just hums. New officers arrive fresh from training, repeating a phrase like ritual. 2 cameras, 1 record, no silence. They say it not because they're told to, but because they've seen what happens when they forget. Across town, the mural still glows beneath the overpass. A woman with close-cropped hair, head lifted, eyes unbroken. Beneath her, in gold paint, dignity is policy. Children walk by on their way to school. Some don't know who she is, some do, but all of them feel it. That invisible shift in what the city accepts and what it won't. In her chambers, Judge Ava Coleman reviews her calendar. Community hearings, policy drafts, a mentorship workshop. She pauses at a new file on her desk, Coleman Protocol, Year 2 Compliance Review. 99% adherence. She smiles. Not pride, just confirmation. Maintenance, not miracle. Outside her window, the courthouse square has become a place people linger instead of avoid. Vendors sell coffee, not protest signs. The marble steps, once stained with silence, now shine in the morning sun. Ava's daughter visits after class, taller now, confidence sharp. She places a flyer on her mother's desk. Student debate topic. What does equality look like in practice? Ava looks up. What did you write? Her daughter grins. It looks like my mom. Ava laughs softly, shaking her head. Then argue that with facts, not feelings. I learned from the best. At the federal building, a small plaque now hangs in the Civil Rights Division corridor. The Coleman Principle. Keep the camera on. Keep the conscience awake. Every new investigator reads it during orientation. Most pause longer than they expect. In the evening, Ava walks through her neighborhood. No escort, no fear. A shopkeeper waves. A passerby nods. The city doesn't stare at her anymore. It recognizes her. She stops by a park where a group of women gather weekly, the Dignity Circle. Former detainees, social workers, students. They share stories, but not wounds. Lessons. Laughter. One woman holds up her phone, showing a new policy memo from another state adopting the Coleman Protocol. They're following your lead, she says. Ava shakes her head. Not mine, ours. Later, under her porch light, she sits with tea and quiet. Wind rustles the trees. Somewhere a siren wails and fades. Not menace, just distance. She opens her notebook, the same one she carried the night she filed her first motion. On the last page, she writes a single line. Dignity doesn't expire when the story ends. She closes it, places it on the table, and looks up at the sky. That deep, calm blue that arrives when storms have done their work. If you listen closely, you can still hear the echo of scissors, not as violence now, but as memory. A reminder of how fragile respect can be when power forgets its purpose, and how beautiful it sounds when someone restores it. So wherever you are watching from, courthouse, classroom, living room, remember this: justice isn't a single verdict. It's a daily choice to keep the camera on, to keep empathy louder than authority, because dignity isn't requested, it's recognized. Share this story if you believe respect should never need permission.